Hey there, dive buddies, and welcome to the show. Today I'm joined by the incredibly talented Matt Krumins, a Melbourne-based professional photographer with over 15 years of experience across landscapes, wildlife, events and underwater photography. A keen diver, he commenced his underwater journey over 2 decades ago, and I've admired Matt's work for several years now, particularly his striking big animal imagery from South Africa and his captivating underwater shots from Tufu Resort, where I had the privilege of living for a year. Matt's passion for nature and storytelling through imagery is unmistakable, and his journey back underwater is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. He was named an Olympus Underwater Ambassador back in 2016, and in 2022 took out the Australian Geographic Nature Photographer of the Year award in the Monochrome category. Beyond the accolades, Matt is a passionate educator who believes photography should be fun, creative, and accessible to everyone.
Welcome to the Scuba Goat Podcast with Matt Waters. Let's dive right in.
We have been diving for 22 years. I know you wouldn't believe it with this young, youthful face, but I actually did my scuba certification at school. I think it was in like year 9 or 10. They had one of the guys, I think he was like a maintenance guy or something like that, but he actually had his instructor for BSAC and decided that, there was enough interest around within, I think it was in Sea Scouts or something like that. And they put on a course and we did all the theory and the pool stuff at the school. And then we actually flew down to Flinders Island and camped on the beach to do all the ocean stuff. We sent a dinghy down there, like a tinny, and a shipping container with all the gear about 6 months in advance. Went down, camped on the beach, and did all the ocean dives. Camping for a week, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was like a long, long time ago. And then a little bit of a break in diving for probably 3 or 4 years. I didn't realize you could dive in Melbourne, of course, because you wouldn't really expect that, would you? Like, it doesn't really look like you should be able to. And then got back into it again when I was 18. So there's about a 3 or 4 year gap in there where, I disappeared, came back, and it was a very, very intense period of diving in my life. Yeah.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I saw a post of yours recently that you've decided to dust off the cobwebs and contemplate getting back underwater.
Yeah, well, hopefully more than contemplate, because I put the gear in for service. It's funny. So the last few years, obviously, like we've had the whole COVID experience and things like that. So that wiped things out. I had a daughter in that time, so she's turning 5 this year, and so a bit more time to get back to it. And I've been doing a lot of when we travel, I'll do some free diving. I was in Tonga last year, WA the year before. We've been around and about, but yeah, time to dust off the Melbourne dive gear and jump back into the cold water, I think, and revisit some of what feels like a long time ago now.
Yeah, I bet. See, I've never jumped in at Melbourne yet, but I've got a couple of friends down there that I keep promising to eventually when I come down. But apparently the macro down there is just as, it'll match like Chowder Bay up here in Sydney.
Yeah, I reckon that if you compare the two, there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences as well. I haven't done a lot of diving around Sydney. I've been up around Nelson Bay, Swansea and Port Stephens a bit. Very, very similar in the dive conditions can be all over the place. But when you do get a good day down here, we've got some pretty amazing reef life. The macro stuff is very good. We've probably just got more challenging conditions, I think. And so that makes it feel a little bit more burdensome sometimes. But really, when you strip back the fact that it is a bit more difficult, you've got a bit more gear on you, and things like that, it's amazing what you find in these places where people just assume there's just sand or nothing. Under piers here, you've got weedy sea dragons all over the place at Flinders. You've got tons and tons of macro life on the inside of the bay as well. But go out to the reefs and you've got incredibly large coral and sponge systems down there. So it's a pretty cool place to dive if you can get past the effort level that needs to go into it.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing that surprised me when I first came to Australia, in particular Sydney. Because you assume I was living in Thailand and Papua New Guinea, super toasty, board shorts and t-shirts every day. Come down to Sydney, you think, it's not going to be much different to that. Yeah. Woo!
It is funny though when you dive to the tropics and you see people like yourself who have been up there and you're going, the water's 29 degrees, and they're still in like a 7 mil wetsuit. They're like, oh, it's freezing today.
Yeah.
That blows my mind on a travel trip when you see that.
Yeah, I'm just having flashbacks now of hugging air compressors when I come up from a dive. 28 mil water, crazy. Anyway, let's backtrack it a little bit, Maddie, because I mean I've been meaning to chat to you for so long now, and I see the YouTube coming up online and see all these marvelous photos that you take and all this fantastic locations and the courses and tuition that you do as well. And I think there's just so much to unpack there that I'm glad to at long last have you on the show so we can actually talk about it all. And
well, always glad to be here. You might want to clear the afternoon if we're going to go that far back, but yeah.
Fill your boots, mate. I'm free until 7 o'clock tonight when I go for a curry.
Love it. Yeah. No, look, I have been diving for a really long time. It's funny though, the underwater thing has the reason for this. The renaissance of my underwater career in Melbourne. It's actually a funny story because speaking of different locations and that sort of stuff, I've actually spent the last sort of 2 months over that summer period. Things are usually a little bit quieter, trying to take holidays, and I've deleted I think close to 60,000 images out of my Lightroom catalog over the last couple of months, and it's just led me to this kind of entirely new world of like opening up all these old. I guess like old memories of things that I've done, and diving is one of those things, especially with underwater photography, that I think it's really important to revisit all those old photos because it makes you realize that as time goes on, you're really impressed. You're so happy with the results at the time, but as time goes on and you improve and you find new techniques, and especially if you do more than just underwater photography, I sort of look back and go, geez, I was so happy with what I got, 10 years ago. And I think I sort of almost lost interest in the local diving because I thought I'd kind of captured, the best of the best. And I look back now and go, you're crazy. There's with the extra experience, the extra technologies in gear and editing and techniques that I've learned, I'm really excited to kind of almost reshoot the entire thing and start again and just implement all this new stuff that's come in, which is, pretty exciting.
Mate, you've literally just taken my thoughts out of my head from yesterday. I'm planning different expeditions and whatnot, and one of them in particular is going back to Tufi Resort in Papua New Guinea, where I lived for almost a year.
I know Tufi well.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah, I know you do. I've seen some of your photos, actually. There's a particular aerial shot that gets used all the time, I think.
I imagine.
I think I found myself sitting there last night thinking, geez, these photos look average. And I think of the, like you say, the quality of equipment we've got now and the upskilling that you do yourselves over the years, because I'm 7 years into it now, photography that is, and I can't wait to get back there because it is just going to be starting. It's a brand new canvas and going again.
It absolutely is, and I think also like with social media bombarding you constantly as well. I noticed in the last episode, I think with Todd, he was sort of saying that, when you go to a place, you get bombarded from that location. And, Tonga is one of those typical things where, you go there or you even so much as say it near a computer and suddenly every Facebook post is of whales. But you sort of get bombarded so heavily at the time with whatever you're surrounded by that I think sometimes you kind of lose sight of what's possible and what's right there in front of you. You're so mixed up with everyone else's stuff. You give it a few months or even a few years and you look back at it very in an isolated way. You're not kind of comparing it to everyone else's or whatnot. And you find some amazing photos you didn't pick up in the first round, but equally some of the ones you thought were keepers, you start to realize that maybe you're mimicking what someone else was doing or a trend of the month or something. And I do think it's important to sort of, reflect back on those shots. And a big part of that for me is actually deleting all of the non-keeper shots. A lot of people keep everything and then kind of have an album for just their best stuff. I've been getting that rampage now, just killing everything that is not my absolute best. And I guess that's the challenge is if you are, if you ever decide that actually I regret deleting that because I really want a shot of that place, it's probably a good idea maybe to be thinking about booking a trip back there to capture it in a better way.
Hell yes. Yeah. Hey, and I tell you what, going on about deleting stuff, my missus, she doesn't save them in files. She doesn't put them on external hard drives. She just keeps the SD cards. So we've got a stack of SD cards.
Yeah, right.
And I keep trying to explain that at some point they're going to be obsolete and you're going to lose everything anyway. I don't care.
Like the old VHS tape sitting there with all those family memories on it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. Oh, look, you know what, though? I guess if you leave it on an SD card long enough that it goes out of date and you haven't done anything with it, it's probably a sign from above that you didn't really need it in the first place.
Yeah. True that. So, hey, tell me, when did you first pick up a camera and decide to take it underwater?
It's a funny story in a way. I've got my mum to thank for that.
Way to go, Mum.
Yeah, thanks, Mum. So I did my dive course at school, and then it kind of lapsed. Like I didn't do anything with it. It was it just kind of got put away. And when I turned 18 and finished school, which was unfortunately a long time ago now, I had a particularly bad breakup with a girlfriend at the time, and it left me in that typical 18-year-old, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life kind of situation. And I remember at the time I took some time away. Rather than going straight into uni, I went straight into the workforce, thinking that I'll try some things out. And a lot of my mates were at uni and everyone was busy. And my mum turned around and said, you just need to have a hobby, something to do like on the weekends that's not just going out and partying with friends. And so I said, well, I don't, not really sure what I'm interested in. I love technology. I love photography and cameras and stuff like that. I'd always been in video and stuff at that point. And even in my work, I was working in video production at the time. Anyway, she sent me this an article out of the newspaper one day that was basically about diving in Victoria. And I can't remember exactly what the article was about or anything, but it sort of showed some pretty cool stuff. I'm sure if you're looking back at it, the photos would be, probably wouldn't be as inspired, but at the time it was like, well, that really exists. And I said, oh, that's all good and well, but there's nowhere to really, where do you start? And so she started texting me all these dive clubs, which, in Victoria, unlike a lot of places in the world, our dive shops kind of act more like dive clubs that have shops in them. And so it was a real sort of social outlet potential and, something to do other than going out and kind of spending all of my hard-earned working money going drinking with friends. And so, I jumped into one of the dive shops. It wasn't my thing. Went into a different one. It wasn't my thing. And eventually found my place in a place called Academy of Scuba. I think at the time it was called Aquatic Adventures. And it turned into just this start of a huge journey, I guess. And from a photography perspective, when I signed up to do my open water course, which was kind of a conversion from BSAC across, I realized that none of my mates knew what I was doing. They were all kind of like, are you crazy? Why would you be doing your scuba course in Melbourne? It's freezing cold. There's nothing there. Like, you're mad. Why don't we just go out on the weekend, do all this sort of stuff? And I'm probably painting them in a really bad light. They were all doing really intensive university degrees as well. So when they played hard and worked hard, but I decided that, you know what? I need to have a camera in my hand to take some photos to validate the decision around why I'm doing it, so I can actually bring it back and go, hey guys, this is what I'm doing. I'm not just staring at pieces of seaweed on the ocean floor. There's actually all this cool stuff. And of course, we didn't have GoPros back then. We didn't have action cameras back then. That was a whole distant thing. So I had one of those little MJU mini cameras. It was like a little Olympus Eggy looking camera. And I think I had a little housing for it. And it kind of grew from there, to be honest. It just, it turned into a bit of an addiction, I think, like diving usually does. And over the years, I think, as I said, with my, even currently, you look back at the photos and you go, oh, I can do better than that. I can do better than that. So it was, camera upgrade after camera upgrade. And that was kind of the start of it. So almost since my first kind of real entry into diving, I've had a camera probably on every single dive I've ever done outside of instructing. Which is a lot.
You've literally entered a very expensive sport and decided to do the camera equipment and purchasing all at the same time to make you even more penniless than what most scuba divers are.
Well, if you want a really, really, really sad story, I've got a good one for you. This is going, fast forward a few years. I was really into it. I'd been to Thailand to live in Koh Tao for 6 months to do.
No way.
Instructor. Yeah.
Whoa.
I was in 2009, 2010.
Who did you? Was it? It wasn't with Crystal or someone like that.
It was with Crystal. Yes. We've probably been on the same dive boat.
Oh, mate, Matty Bolton was the course director at Crystal. Yeah, he's got his own company, Black Turtle.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah. I lived on the island for like 4 years.
Oh, for four. Okay, well, you did better than me. I
Yeah.
got 6 months in and realised if I stay much longer, I'm probably just going to stay.
Yeah.
I thought, no, it's probably time to move. I need to
Yeah.
move. But yeah, did that. Came back and I'd taken some photos and back in Victoria, and I just sort of agreed with myself that I was going to upgrade my camera to the first interchangeable lens camera system that I could get. So this was still, relatively entry level, I guess, compared to today, but it was a Panasonic Lumix GH2, I think.
Okay.
And I decided straight out I was going to do it properly. I bought a Nauticam housing, bought the ports, bought all the accessories. I was like, I'm going to do it seriously. I'm going to do it. Bought it all, took it out for like 3 dives and had taken some really nice shots. And once again, Mum steps in with a text message going, hey, did you see this? And there was an article in the paper again, and this one was actually advertising that Olympus was looking for an underwater ambassador for their housings. And I was like, well, I've got no chance, but what's the point? There was no entry fee or anything like that. Threw my photos in, and then, about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got the phone call saying that I'd been chosen to do this ambassadorship. And I was so excited until I realised that meant that my brand new $15,000 Lumix GH2 in Nauticam housing was going to get put on the shelf, and part of the prize was an entry-level Olympus pen camera.
Oh, dear me.
And so, it was a bit of a kick in the guts, but it started off another huge journey of, where it's taken me. So, as much as it pains me, I think I only sold that camera about 2 years ago or gave it away or something because it was getting on. But as much as it pains me, it was the start of really good things.
Yeah. Fair play to you. And Mum again, who'd have thought, finding that kind of details in a newspaper?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's the only person who reads a newspaper these days. So, no.
So you were up against a competition of one.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably no one else entering. They're wondering, why is there no one else entering this competition? But yeah, no. So it's and look, she's an artist as well, so she's always got my creative side looked after. She's always encouraging that side of things. So, yeah. Anytime those opportunities come up, she's never too far away from the pulse on that stuff.
So how does it pan out with doing an ambassadorship? Because you hear about people getting on these roads, but you never really find out much detail about it. They seem to do it, and then all of a sudden, on to the next thing. And bear in mind, if you mess anything up, we can edit it out. It doesn't matter.
No need to do that. I like to keep my opinions close because I always respect that my opinions are only based on my experience, and that doesn't at all mean that it's the same as anyone else's experience. So I think that's an important thing to put in as a caveat. I think my experience with ambassadorships are that, in general, most people who have ambassadorships, I kind of question why, in a way. The example I can give you, I work with a lot of brands these days, not from an ambassador perspective, but I run a photography festival. And so all the major brands sponsor the festival. And so they're all up there, have close relationships in with their teams. And what I tend to find is that the reality is there's not a lot in it for most people except for the glory of saying I'm an ambassador with that brand. A lot of people would assume that as an ambassador you get given all the gear and you get gifted everything and that you've got free reign and they pay for you to go traveling and all these things. And I think the reality is usually for most people very different to that. You do get projects. I still do pick up sponsored projects from brands, but not as an ambassador. So I did the Fuji GFX 100S2 launch with the 500mm lens last year. We went to the Northern Territory and shot a campaign. And I've done those projects and they're really great. They're more sort of, I'll call them transactional projects, but the ones where it just becomes a relationship thing, I guess it gives you access to gear and stuff like that. But generally speaking, that's kind of where it stops. And depending on the brand, there's not always all the perks people think. It's almost like I kind of think like the influencer lifestyle. There's, of course, a lot of people out there who are making a good living out of doing it. But the vast majority of people make it look great whilst behind the scenes it's maybe not such a shiny story. And I kind of feel like ambassadorships maybe fall into that a little bit. Hence, I had to give up a far superior camera to shoot on an entry-level camera, as an example. It commits you to doing experiences and not appearances, but like attending trade shows and things like that. And if you've got something to sell of your own or something in your brand that helps, fantastic. But I think it's a common misconception to think that these are all paid opportunities and you can live as an ambassador or something. So maybe some access to early gear and stuff. But yeah, I think in general, I feel like ambassadorships are a great way to maybe have some backing, make you look credible, but there's lots of ways to do that as well. So, being tied into a brand, I'm not sure is always the best option for people out there.
Yeah, fair one.
Yeah. But as I said, that's my experience, maybe not the general experience either.
Yeah. And speaking of brands, you're a Nikon dude, aren't you?
I was Nikon. I've actually been everyone.
Okay.
The only person I'm missing Leica. I haven't done Leica yet. I'm currently on Sony, so I shoot a bit of Fuji for their projects. But I shoot predominantly on Sony. I changed from Nikon in 2021.
Okay.
And before that, it was Olympus. Before that, it was Canon. Before that, it was Lumix, and then it was Canon. So I kind of get around, to be honest.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, that's it.
Go where you need to go.
That's it.
I was having a conversation. Was it yesterday? Yesterday, day before, something like that, and it was about brands. That usual conversation: which brand is better for which, and I wonder, because I look at Sony and think, bugger me, they're really, really good. But then you look at Nikon and they're really, really good. And I shoot on Canon and I think it's really, really good. And I think it's the web of trying to weed out, which one's better than which, when you add in all the components that get put onto the camera as well to make these images and this video footage complete. I don't think you can actually answer the question as to which one's better than which.
No,
is that fair to say?
I reckon you're bang on the money. I don't think there is a better brand. I think they've all got strong points, and so maybe for an individual, you might find that one brand is better than another. Like I'll give you an example. At the moment, I haven't had that kind of post evening beverage contemplation session around whether I switch out of Sony again, only 3 years later. Because I look at it and I go, Nikon's got a 400mm f2.8 lens with a built-in 1.4 teleconverter for wildlife. Now, that's kind of my dream lens. I used to have the Nikon 400, didn't have a teleconverter built in, and it was good, but I didn't like that it didn't have a teleconverter. The new one's got a teleconverter. Sony hasn't come out with anything yet that's in that realm. And so arguably, if I had complete free reign from right now, I'd probably be going and buying myself a Z8 or a Z9 with that lens and adapting everything else around it. I think equally, if you are a wide-angle shooter, from what I understand, although it may have changed recently, but I know Canon's got a lot more options in really ultra-wide rectilinear lenses, for instance. They've got the 10 to 20 or something like that, which no other brand really, they don't have anything in that range. You can get third-party lenses, of course, but so if you loved your ultra-wides or, your fisheye stuff, that might direct your decision-making a little bit. But I really do think at the end of the day, it's like a car. It kind of comes down to how much money you spend. If you spend $10,000 on a camera body, odds are you're going to get really similar specs across that to another brand, maybe a few perks here and there, but it's probably going to be the same as the other $10,000 camera. You spend $2,000 and odds are it's probably going to be comparable across the range. And maybe that's the mistake sometimes we make, is that someone would advocate, oh my God, Sony's the best, it's the best. And that's because they're shooting on the highest end version of that camera. But they might be talking to someone else and comparing it against something that's, mid-range or even a high mid-range. And so it's not really apples and apples. When you actually line them up against each other, they are really similar. I think maybe the only thing that does sway me to Sony a little bit these days is that their prime lens lineup is incredibly small compared to their competitors, incredibly lightweight. And I think they're also a lot cheaper on a lens-for-lens basis. And they're sharper in a lot of cases. So you can buy a Sony full lineup of all their, normal primes before you go to super teles. You could probably buy for less than 10 grand. You've got every single one of their primes, up to 135 millimeters. So you can't do that with some of the other brands. And so that's a decision as well, if you're that kind of a shooter. But they've all got pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah.
It's probably the one that really has a discrepancy for me is underwater housings is where the market really separates, and I think that's a game changer in a lot of ways, depending on what you shoot. It doesn't matter what camera you put in it; the housing you have is everything. When you're underwater, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'd love to have a Nottingham housing, but my camera's too old for it. Well, I say too old. I bought it, and a year later they stopped making it. Thank you very much, Canon. Yeah.
What are you on?
M6 Mark II, mirrorless.
Full on.
Yeah. I thought it would be ideal for diving and traveling because of the lightweight. And
no, that's the key with cameras and underwater housings. You got to commit. You commit 5 years ahead of where you think you should be, and that's where you make the decisions. So.
Yeah, and that's what I did with this one, really. And at least I could find I got an Icolite housing for it, and it's done the job. Yes. So, another couple of years with that one, and then we'll move on.
Lovely.
What's all right? So we could go down a real rabbit hole of photography here and spend hours on it, couldn't we? And I'll probably learn a hell of a lot for free as well, which is good.
Go for it. Use the experience, hey? I'll try and remember all these things underwater.
Well, I'd actually like to know what's your favourite style of photography? What's the thing that, I know when you get a camera in your hand, probably get excited straight away, but what's the one that really gets you going?
Yeah, I reckon it's really easy for me. I absolutely love monochrome underwater photography. That's like has to be the most driving creative force in my world. Not with every subject, of course. There's some things that don't translate overly well, but I've got my little cuttlefish in the back there. No, it's not going to focus. It's in the back there. Look, it's to me, monochrome underwater is a really interesting one. I'll do a shameless brag, but I did take out the Australian Geographic Nature Photographer of the Year in monochrome in 2022 with a monochrome underwater shot up in Port Stephens. Oh no,
nice.
Fish Rock Cave. But I don't know. I think that's like this is a hangover from when I first got into it, I think, because I always took these shots and they're very, very colourful underwater. And what I realised really quickly through my wife was that, bright colours on walls aren't always appropriate. And so I always wanted to try and make things look aesthetically pleasing and interesting to people who weren't just divers. A beautiful reef scene is incredible for most people, but when it comes to putting it on a wall or wanting a print version of that, it takes a pretty niche subject to convert that colour into something that works on a wall in most people's houses or locations. And so I thought monochrome was a really interesting way of making wildlife photography appealing to the masses because you can play more on the texture and the shapes and silhouettes and, that kind of interest. And it's not immediately obvious necessarily what you're even looking at it. You can kind of walk past it and it's just a feature on the wall, whereas a color version, it really grabs your attention and that's great, but it doesn't always fit into the environment. So I kind of went down that monochrome path a bit, quite a while back. And I think that works best, generally speaking, with sort of more large pelagics. So, you're talking whales, sharks, mantas, anything in that realm. But I also really love some really minimalistic coral reef stuff where you've just got, you use the black and white contrast sliders where you can sort of mix the color tones to actually highlight sections of the reef just through the color contrast in black and white. And that can make a really, really interesting shot where you can almost completely manipulate the lighting just through that color selection, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So when you're...
am I alone in the black and white field or is...
No. Straight away, I'm thinking Don Silcock had a little play around with it a couple of years ago. And Talia Grease, she did there's one photo in particular I can remember because I think it's absolutely fabulous. And I think it was a bottlenose or maybe a spinner dolphin.
Oh, lovely.
But it's literally just a black and white. And it just looks so eye-catching. It's marvellous.
Yeah.
So when you...
The other thing with the black and white thing, actually, now I think about it, I've got some opened in the background on my browser, just reminding me of that that passion. But I think it also helps to disguise conditions. That's probably one other thing I'll throw in there. It's a really, really easy way to disguise tricky conditions. If you have a bit of not backscatter, but you've got a bit of stuff in the water. When you've got colour there, it's not as forgiving, and so I think it helps sometimes to clean things up a bit.
Get rid of the whale snot.
That's exactly right.
So when you dive in, you're obviously purposely set up on Monochrome. Have you ever shot in? The way I'm going here is I'm talking about post editing now, because the amount of post edit production that you can do is just, it blows my mind how you can have a full color image and make it black and white and blah 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 blah. Is it a significant difference playing around with doing a color shot and then making it black and white to try and get the same kind of result?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely similarities across it. I tend to shoot black and white a lot of the time regardless, to be honest. You know, the way I always look at photography, and this goes with land photography as well, is that you can't control color on the spot. You know, you can't change the color of the day. You can't change the white balance of the environment around you. And so if there's, or nor can you actually change the color of objects in your scene. So I don't know if you've ever had that situation. You're photographing something on a reef, and then of course there's this really shiny, colorful something in the background. And of course it's a huge distraction in the shot. You can't necessarily control that. And so I kind of take the philosophy that I can't control color, but I can control the light. You know, you can control your exposure, you can control the direction you shoot to get different contrast, you can control the way you might have shapes and contrast interplay with each other. And so I find that actually shooting in black and white most of the time is really helpful, because that is something I can control, the tone. But what I can't control is the color. I can manipulate that later on in post. You know, if I don't like that thing in the background, you can mask it to pull the saturation down, or you can, you know, remove it altogether. But if you focus too much on the color, sometimes that means you go for a dive and you decide, no, this day is just not worth shooting because the water's a bit green, the such and such isn't working, and it can be disheartening. Whereas you go to black and white and suddenly it sort of strips out this layer of uncontrollable variable. And I think that, I don't know, it feels better doing it. And I think it makes you think harder about the contrast in your shots too. Like, I think you genuinely look at your shot and start to go, hold on a second, of course this subject's not going to stand out. The background's brighter than it. And so the contrast needs to be flipped. If I move to here, then the subject's going to be brighter against a dark background. That'll pop out. So it makes you think a bit harder. Yeah. Of course, you do get a lot more production or more production options in Lightroom as well when converting in Lightroom or whatever program you use too. You've got the color sliders, you've got even things like the picture profiles now that are built in. The black and white picture profiles are really useful. And I think as long as you kind of stick to a theme and you try and keep your edits consistent enough that you develop a bit of a style, I think it works really, really well. Yeah, definitely.
I'm tempted to set mine on black and white next time I go down Chowder Bay and give it a whirl.
It's not a bad idea. Like, it does make you see things a lot differently. And often you'll get, they'll convert to color and you go, what was I thinking? This photo is really rubbish because it works in black and white but not color. But I generally do think that, if it was going to work in the first place, it'll work in both. But more often than not, if something's only going to work in one version, it's going to work in black and white rather than color.
Yeah. I'll just say we've got some black anglerfish down at Chowder Bay, and they're a pain in the ass to try and actually get any kind of detail on them because they're so black,
Yeah.
It might work in black and white, actually.
Yeah, it'll make you think about it differently. You can't use the color to contrast it. So, definitely worth it. I think the only thing you really got to watch out for, I guess, if you want to look at a technical side, is that if you put something like a digital red filter into your black and white, so, in your picture styles and your Canon, and then you can hit the info button and sort of adjust what monochrome is. Yeah. So you've got contrast sliders, sharpness sliders and things like that. There's an option there to have a digital red filter. And whilst that often makes things look better because it adds extra contrast, it makes the blues almost go pitch black. It'll also screw up your histogram to represent the monochrome image. And so when you go to color, you may find that you've blown out or crushed detail that was going to be there. So it takes a bit of, I won't say practice, but trial and error, I guess, to see the result in camera. You check that histogram and then you look at the color version on your computer and try and kind of suss out, okay, cool. If I'm shooting these into blue water and I'm using a digital red filter, it's crushing the blues to black. I need to make sure that I'm underexposing or overexposing to kind of compensate for that a little bit.
So when you get those messages with Matt, what the fuck have I done wrong here? And I give you a blown out photo.
Yeah, it's basically. Oh gosh. Oh, you know what's funny? Like, this is the experimental part, isn't it? This is the fun bit. I think this is the part that I miss in photography sometimes, is the playing with it. I think, we can get so bogged down in like what we're supposed to do that you don't just muck around. And sometimes mucking around lets you find these little quirks that makes your work different. I'm always searching for what can make my work differentiate from the next person, because as technology gets better, I mean, we've got so many amazing photographers now. It's pretty hard to stand out or to do something that others aren't doing, I guess. And that's the novelty in it,
There's a lot of point and shoot that work really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sticking with the macro, the macro theme, the TG range. Wow. Yeah,
it's crazy. And what about like lighting these days? I've been researching new strobes for no real reason, because my strobes are perfectly fine. But, the odd typical, getting back into it, I better treat myself. And like what's available now compared to what was available, even a few years ago, it's insane. Like, and the price point that you can get some really decent gear at is amazing. So I was looking even the other day, what are those macro tubes with the create the circly effect? I can't remember what they're called because they look at so many devices.
Is it something from Backscatter?
Yeah, something like that. And it's kind of like a tube that obviously has a reflective surface inside. So when you shoot through the tube, it kind of creates like a ring of light around your subject, but it's a mirror ring of your subject. So you get the color profile of your subject. But there's all these like little novelties, you can add that just it's pretty cool what you can play with.
I got a retro snoot for one of my strobes for Christmas. So,
lovely.
And I'm over the moon. It's and you hit on the spot earlier on. It's you get a new piece of equipment, and then all of a sudden you're back to that school kid that can't tie his shoes and scratching your head and 1,000 wasted photos. But eventually something just clicks and it all comes together. So,
well, especially a snoot. To keep a snoot in one piece for over 10 dives, that's impressive, because most people get so pissed off with them that after dive 2, they're being snapped in half and thrown in the bin. I've had many swearing arguments at a Blenny trying to use my retro snoot to light it. But my gosh, what an incredibly cool but bloody difficult piece of equipment.
Yeah. I'd like to say I'm looking forward to getting there, but I'm enjoying the journey at the minute, so it's all good.
Yeah, lovely.
What strobes did you go for?
Look, I think my ones are still the old CNC YSD2s.
Okay.
From a while back. I've got no real reason to upgrade them. I'm a quality person. I don't have a lot of time to do my own thing in photography these days. With work, photography, and trips and courses and all that sort of stuff. And so when I do get out there to shoot, I treat that time pretty preciously. So I'm a bit of a quality snob when it comes to gear, and knowing that, I guess, it's a bad habit to get into, but it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about walking away from underwater for a while in Victoria. And that was that I sort of felt like I'd had the shot. And so every time I went down to the peninsula and jumped in the water, if that shot that I was taking right then didn't outperform when I say outperform, when it wasn't a better shot than the one I've already got, there was no point in keeping it, because I've already got a great shot of that. And it's probably a very negative loop to get into. But I sometimes look at it and go, well, would different equipment allow me to treat that differently? Would it genuinely solve a problem? Would it really improve things? And I look at the size of strobes these days. One thing's really exciting for me that wasn't available when I was making my last strobe purchase was the high-speed sync capabilities of these underwater strobes, which, for those who are listening who haven't played or heard of this before, but HSS, or high-speed sync, is basically where you can, on a interchangeable lens camera, exceed the sync speed limit. So a lot of your cameras, if you have not a point and shoot, but an interchangeable lens camera, you'll only be able to shoot at, say, one. I think the A1 has got 1/400th of a second. But yeah, most cameras have a much lower sync speed, and some of the older units are down at 1/200th of a second. It makes it almost impossible to shoot up in towards sunballs without crazy closed apertures and things like that, which has other issues. And so there's that aspect of it. You can also get completely pitch black backgrounds in daylight conditions, which is really exciting, especially for snoot photography, not having to go out and really muck around in low light conditions. so that really excited me, and that kind of got me thinking, like, what's out there now, and that's a total minefield. My God, like, you want to get confused and realize that, the sky's the limit. Some of the strobes I was looking at the other day, I think they were like, 4,000 Australian dollars a piece or something stupid, which is nuts, but you get what you pay for in a lot of those instances, and it makes me kind of curious. Well, if you get what you pay for, like, well, I want to know what I'm paying for.
I want to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly right. You don't know until you don't know, or until you know. So, that intrigued me a little bit. I do bring myself back down to earth though, and go, hold on a second, it's a flash.
Yeah.
Let's maybe do a few dives first, and let's see where we're at with our current gear, rather than than upgrading. I think my Sony A1 has only, with its Nauticam housing and all its bells and whistles, has only been in the water for probably 30 dives or something like that. So,
okay.
Probably need to spend a bit more time with it before I, start treating myself to too many toys.
Yeah. And you've also got to put it on balance that the boss of the house has to give it the thumbs up on spending the money on it as well.
Well, it's a work expense. One of the benefits of being a photographer, everything's everything in life's a work expense, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I use that one all the time for planning trips.
Yeah.
Any dive equipment, any travel.
Oh, I'll tell you what, that is something I really miss, actually. We're getting back into a bit of travel this year, and not that I haven't traveled. I've done a lot of travel, but usually for work, not my own photography. I tell you what, I do miss a good dive trip. It's there's nothing like rocking up to a place knowing you've got 5 or 6 days of 4 to 5 dives a day, and that's all you're doing. You're just in the water, and always day one you're kind of like, whoa, what the hell's going wrong? Nothing's working. And then by day 2 you realize, oh, that's because this setting's wrong and that thing's wrong, and I haven't done this, and I moved the strobe here, and that happened and this happened, and just because you've got so much diving to do, you just fall into that groove, and there's just something so, I don't know, cathartic about being underwater, just doing your thing, knowing there's nothing else in the world that needs to happen right then.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, for me, diving it's my happy place without a shadow of a doubt. But then you put a camera in my hand and it's the ultimate happy place for me. I've got a mind that's going a million miles an hour, 24/7. It's like a fucking bag of frogs on acid. And as soon as I get in the water, they all shut up for as long as I'm under the water, And I think it's just that relaxation point, and then having the focus of the camera and that enjoyment of trying to capture a nice shot. It's beautiful. Best place in the world.
Do you ever get that? This happened to me for a while, where I'd had that exact experience, but then if I captured like an amazing shot, like sometimes you have that perler shot where you just go, that is everything I thought and more, and nothing could have improved the way that came together. And often, like, retrospectively, you go, hold on a second, actually a lot could have been improved. But there's that moment where you go, I've nailed it. For me, that sometimes used to be the point where my brain almost checked out of the dive, and I was like, cool, I'm done. I'm going to go to the surface now. Like, I've only been there for 15 minutes, but like, it was like mission accomplished, like achieved.
Yep. I'm done. That's it. I'm going for sundowners on the top deck.
Exactly. Yeah, that's I remember having that experience on the Coolidge years and years and years ago. We were down in the galley, and I had my wife there modeling, and she had a torch on her wrist, one of those old the light and motion light things. And anyway, she had one of those big flasks, like a water flask thing, and it was lit up from underneath, and it was glowing in front of her, and we're at 49 meters or something. And anyway, take this shot, and I was just like, oh, this is just everything I thought this shot would be and more. Had a bit of narcosis on that as well, and and I was just so convinced that everything was done. I was ready just to walk away. And then my heart started racing because I was like, oh, this is so exciting. And then I realized I was getting into like a hyperventilation loop of just like, okay, can't keep up with this. And, it's there's a moment when, if you haven't got a camera in your hand when you're underwater, you wouldn't know the feeling. But geez, when you nail the shot, it's it's something else.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've done a couple of whoops underwater, that's for sure. Even the missus doesn't shoot with I call her a real camera. She's all about the GoPro.
Yep.
But I must admit, a couple of years ago when we did the Galapagos, and I at the time I only had a little G7X Mark II I was taking with me with strobes and housing and all that kind of stuff. And you done the Galapagos?
I have not done the Galapagos. Okay. I was all due and scheduled to do it, and then it fell through, sadly. It's on my hit list.
Unlucky. But anyway, it was great, so you missed out. So I mean, I went with all my gear, jumped in, and I think I did 4 dives at Darwin's, and thought, nah, sod it. this thing's just a pain in the arse. It's not getting any kind of good photography. And the next dive I jumped in with the spare GoPro, and we got so much more from just having an action camera.
Yeah, right.
But she's the one that's recording literally everything. Wherever we go, she's recording. And every now and then there's a little turn and a raise of the eyebrows and a mask, and I can tell, she's got a good shot. She's happy.
That's funny. But you know what? The GoPro is really interesting. I did Tonga with one of Scott Portelli's groups last year, and there was a couple of people on that trip who had the latest and greatest GoPros, and they were shooting. And of course, because you're swimming around like a mad person, trying to in some cases keep up with these heat runs and whatnot. And I'm sitting there trying to drag a 10 kilogram Nauticam 8-inch dome port through the water. And of course, because they were so agile, they were there with the shot. The clarity out of it was incredible. Because it doesn't really need autofocus, it just nailed everything. Whereas, you're on the surface, so the water's interfering with autofocus and all sorts of stuff. There was a part of me that was, a bit peeved that I didn't try and simplify the video components of that. Because
Mate, I've got the 11. I think Jazz has got the 13 or whatever the latest one is. And with the stability that comes out of them now, I bolt one on the top of the camera housing.
Yeah.
So I'll take my photos, but I'll just press record when I get in the water and leave it running.
Now,
the amount of times I've caught stuff. Sometimes.
Edit? Do you play, or is this one of those like the old GoPro when it first came out? Everyone was like recorded every single breath they took, and it just sort of what do you do with it? There's too much footage to do anything. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, it's in fact what I was doing at one point was, in fact, where were we? August last year, went up to Lady Musgrave with a couple of mates on their boat, and we did 3 days diving all over the little out reefs there. And again, as soon as I jump in, press record on it. And I was just doing the old tapping on whenever I saw something, and I thought, it'd be a good video. I'd do a couple of taps on my camera housing, just with a double-ended clip or whatever. And when I look back into the video footage, because it's an hour plus long for each dive, I just have a look at the spikes. I find the spikes and I just fast forward straight to it.
That's a fantastic idea. Love that.
FCP is great for it.
It's true though. It looks like a lot of people, they do shoot all this great stuff, but because it's almost like the same as a photography thing, why I've culled so many photos. When there's so much stuff there, sometimes it just doesn't. You can't comprehend it. You can't do anything with it. There's too much, and so if you've got a system like that, that's a fantastic way to, I guess, ensure that you're still getting the moments, but you're not just creating work for yourself that never gets done.
Yeah. And it's the same with the photos. If I have an hour underwater and there's plenty to shoot, there's a few hundred photos there straight off the bat. And I've got now into the habit of just doing I use Lightroom like most people do.
Yep.
And I'll just skip through them and I'll do 5-star or 1-star. If it's a 1-star, straight in the bin. 5-star, it means I'm going to do something with it at some point, And that's just my way of trying to cull it down a little bit.
If you want a really handy hint with your Lightroom, especially with underwater photography. So if you go into your dive, so like you go into the folder where that dive is, you select all the images, you right click, and down the bottom there's the option that says stacking. So stacking is basically where you can kind of it creates a stack of photos. So you only see the top of the stack, but you can have as many photos as you want sitting inside the stack. And if you open it, you can see what's there and rearrange what's on top, etc. But there's an option in there at the very bottom. It's called Auto Stack by Capture Time. And essentially what it does is it allows you to automatically group together photos that were shot within a particular amount of time. So I always kind of go, in all sorts of photography, we don't usually get the photo in one. We usually get the photo in like 10 or 20 because you'll take a shot, you do a small improvement, you take another shot, small improvement, take another shot, until you finally refine it to the end shot. And sometimes then you go a couple of steps too far and you've got to backtrack it a little bit. But these shoots, if you went for a dive, you might take, say, 200 photos, but you probably only had, say, like 10 subjects. You've got 20 photos of each subject. So with the auto stacking feature, you can go and use the slider to say that if the photos were shot less than 30 seconds apart, stack them together. And so what it can do is really simplify when you open your Lightroom, rather than seeing, 200 individual photos that's a total mess. It'll actually consolidate it down, and it's pretty good. I mean, obviously you want to go and check that it hasn't, stacked multiple subjects together, but it basically puts it into the scenes that you shot. And so you only need to select one photo of each scene, because you're not going to publish two images that are almost identical, where one's clearly better. So it's a really quick way to consolidate down what can be huge swathes of information into a much more kind of consumable amount of photos. And then you can kind of go into each of the stacks and go, cool, this was the best shot, drag it to the top of the stack, close the stack again. And rather than seeing all 20 or 30 options you had, it's giving you the top pick of the options only.
That's a great idea.
But yeah, it's a really good, especially historically, if you look back into your old trips, dive trips, you know, sometimes you come back with thousands of photos and you're like, I don't even know where to start. That auto stacking can be just, you know, one first step that makes it look a little more manageable.
Yeah. That'll probably that'll help with the brain fart moments as well. You know, I start on the process of going through every single one, and you know, about an hour in, the brain just says, "Nah, not interested." Need to walk away.
Yeah, definitely. It is hard to stay motivated when you're looking at them, especially when you're looking at a lot of photos that ultimately didn't turn out. It can make you feel pretty rubbish. You know, thinking, well, I'm pretty crap. There's 2,000 photos and I only like 3 of them. I guess the important thing to consider is that you don't know how many photos your photography hero took before they presented the 3 photos to you. So, never feel too bad about that side of it, I guess.
Yeah. So are you, let's talk a little bit about the camera courses that you do, actually, because this will be a pre-lead into, are you going to be doing it underwater as well?
Oh, good question. So I run photography courses, all sorts of photography courses. So everything from beginners workshops for people who are first time picking up a camera, not underwater, but just in general, right through to, I've started running trips to South Africa, doing wildlife workshops in Kruger, and everything in between. So full day trips, do 5-day trips up to the mountains and stuff. I run all sorts of different workshops and courses. I used to run a lot of underwater photography courses, mostly through the dive clubs. You know, Melbourne especially, we've got a pretty clicky system in terms of clubs and things like that. And it's, you know, it's a good way to, I guess, encourage people to get into the water and new divers to pick up something new as well. So I still do run a lot of private workshops for underwater photography. I don't actually run anything in water, which is surprising to some people. You know, they think that underwater photography course means jumping in the water down at the beach and, you know, swimming around for 5 hours, learning underwater photography. But the reality is, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, is, you know, underwater, there's only so much you can communicate. So all the workshops I do now are land-based workshops, or more classroom-based. And so we do some practical experiments. They usually run over 3 or 4 nights. So we'll do the first night will be the basics, and then there's an assignment given to you. You've got 2 or 3 weeks to complete the assignment. We catch up again. We review what you've done. We work on the next sort of more advanced section, which is usually to do with lighting. Send you away for another 2 or 3 weeks to go and get some dives under your belt. And then we do a review and critique and an editing session on the 3rd night. Sometimes it spills over to a 4th. Look, I think I will bring them back. I was saying I was in Ocean Divers the other day and dropping my gear in for a service, and I said to Jane that it's funny because as much as I've got so much experience in this space, you know, having not been in the water in Victoria for quite some time, you know, regularly at least, I've got a bit of imposter syndrome in Victoria. So I think I need to get some dives under my belt before I feel confident, you know, going and banging on about underwater photography down here again. Look, I think it'll definitely be in the pipeline. You know, my plans are really to have probably an underwater photography course on my website, an online version, because a lot of it is theory-based. And I know, having gone through the self-teaching part of this before, there's a few really key people and key messages that I learned that were really pivotal moments in my underwater photography. And I feel as though they're not always the ones that are communicated very well in courses, you know, that I've experienced or heard about. And so, I think there's a lot in there that we can kind of consolidate. And that'll be in the works at some point.
Yeah. I picked up on Kruger there.
Yeah.
Kruger National Park.
That's it.
Do you stay in the park when you go?
We stay about 25 minutes out of the park. So we stay in it's called Marloff Park. It's like they've got their own game park there, but it's a gated community of lodges, which is sort of on the border of Kruger. So it's got a fence. You can go right up to the Kruger fence line, but it's not in Kruger itself. The thing about staying in Kruger is your options are pretty limited and they're quite expensive. But the reality is that, staying just outside, you get basically the same access. You get a bit more freedom in terms of moving around, especially in the evenings and things like that.
You're not gonna get eaten.
Yeah, that's it. Look, it's like if you're in a gated part of the park where you can be at night, they're usually sort of camping areas or in very, very luxe lodges. Yeah, a lot more options when you start to accept that 20 minutes out of Kruger, we're up probably half an hour earlier than those in the park. But you know what? Who's sleeping anyway when you're so excited about what you might see the next day?
Oh, mate. We did it, what was it? I want to say 2009. No, 2018. It was,
lovely. Yep.
My mate was doing a couple of months in South Africa as a birthday present to himself. And we were due to meet up for the sardine run. And he hit me up and said, oh, mate, I'll hook you up. I'll hook you up.
Is it as incredible sounds?
This is one of those moments that I'll probably edit out of the show, but there's a lot up there that are doing the operations, and I'll put you straight in touch with the man and woman that you need to do it with.
Yeah, okay. Is it everything that you like? I mean, I've seen photos, but it looks insane.
Yeah, it's hard work on your back, and you can have long cold days when you're bobbing around on the boat.
Yeah.
But when it all goes off and you get in the water, you just can't help but laugh. It's just fucking mental. When you've got sharks all around you, you've got a seal that comes past to say hello. You've got a bird that's dive bombing through the top, and there's a 3,000 3,000 head of dolphins pinging around you, and a million little fish running for their life. It's just epic.
I just can't picture, to me, that sounds like, like Pandora's box of underwater animals. Just like someone just opened this box and all the spirits got out. It's just the photos I've seen. I can't even fathom what it would be like to be in the water with that. Just the adrenaline would just be insane.
Well, the same guy that I did the Kruger Park with, Dino, his name is Dino Jenkins, and we were coming up to Port St John's, and we were discussing, and he's like, all I want to see, and I can't do a Welsh accent, but imagine a Welsh accent. All I want to see is dolphins. I've never seen dolphins in the water when I'm diving. So, Dino, I guarantee you're going to see dolphins. And that was the word I used, was guarantee. He went, no. You cannot guarantee that I'm going to see anything. It's wildlife. You cannot guarantee. I'm like, I'm going to guarantee it. And, first day, and he's in the water, and just jumped off the back. These dolphins appeared. He's jumped off the water with one of my other mates, and you could just hear raucous laughter through a snorkel for the next 45 minutes.
That's amazing.
It's a formidable location.
I'm going to tell you that when you say guarantee, I kind of agree with him. Going back to Koh Tao for a second, I don't know about your experience there. You obviously stayed a lot longer than I did, so I'm sure you had more luck than me. But I arrived in Koh Tao in late December, just after Christmas. And I had a friend come over with me just to help sort of settle in, and when you don't know anyone and stuff. And he was a bit into diving as well, so we went out for a couple of dive days, and there was the call out on the radios that there was a whale shark right in the bay, right close on in, and of course every boat in Koh Tao was there, and we jumped in the water, and it was just insane. It was probably the equivalent of the sardine run but with people, and this big goofy whale shark's kind of bobbing about doing its thing, and that was amazing. And anyway, I said to my mate, look, it's pretty crazy. And I had a macro lens on my camera as well from the dive that we were on. So I was like, I'm not going to get a shot. Anyway, I went in and I grabbed the shot of a spot. Anyway, I thought, stuff it. I jumped back on the boat, went to go and change a lens to try and get a nice shot and stuff like that. And then I said to him, you know what? Don't even bother. I'm going to be here for ages. I'll see heaps of whale sharks. I've been told they're here all the time.
Yeah,
that was it. That was the only whale shark.
It's
all those guarantees I'd been told.
Yeah, it's the torture of Koh Tao. It's whale shark season comes, and there's those people that never see them, and then there's some that are very lucky. And thankfully I was quite lucky. I saw quite a lot while I was there.
Oh, very jealous. My whale shark has been very limited.
Yeah, they're only. Young pups though. I didn't see anything much bigger than 4 meters. but
Yeah.
still, it's a reasonable size.
And you know what? Optics, the right lens can turn a 4-meter whale shark into a 15-meter whale shark if you're clever.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mate, there's a few times I've been looking for macro for customers out at Chumpon Pinnacle and the rock that's off at the back there, Barracuda Rock, and I've got my face into the coral looking for macro stuff, thinking, shit, these people are going to see nothing. It's crap. Blah blah blah. And I just get this yank of the fins and look over my shoulder, and there's a whale shark just there. And it's the guest that's behind you trying to get your attention because he's about to run into the back of your noggin.
Love it.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Memories from that place. Yeah.
But no, Sardine Run, you've got to do it, man.
Yeah. I'm thinking that might be on one of my lists because that's a July thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I run my workshops over there in July, August. So it's my 40th birthday next year. So, and I'll be turning 40 the week before I have my workshop trip. So that might just be a little side.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And, I'll canvas that one tonight over a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And I'll grab those details.
Well, it's offshore Africa. Rob Nettleton and Debbie Smith. And Debbie Smith is a Hall of Famer. Lovely couple. They're the only ones that operate their 365. They actually operate directly out of Port St. John. And fabulous people. And they've got a spotter plane as well. So,
brilliant.
You sit around and wait for the spotter plane to tell you where to go and whether you put your dive gear on or your snorkel gear. You know exactly what to do before you even get there.
That makes life a lot easier. I'm waiting for the day when they have spotted drones and they send out like a little, swarm of drones just to cover huge, vast areas of the ocean. I'm not sure how many will make it back to the boat, but yeah.
I'm in a little group on Facebook that shall not be named, but it's people using drones and just doing what the hell they want. And there was one on there the other day where took a screenshot of his controller. It's 6.2 kilometers away from him.
Yeah.
Holy crap! I wouldn't have the balls to do that. I'd expect it to drop in the water.
Yeah, look, I know of people doing those sorts of flights. I guess it's not something I've done myself, just for the record, but I can sort of see as well where you go, these days drones are relatively speaking inexpensive compared to what they were. And if that means that you're, achieving whatever it was, and look, flying over the ocean is probably one of the safer places to be flying it compared to some of the places I've seen people do those sorts of, those long distances. It's going to be an incredible technology when they work out how to regulate that properly. I think the issue with me, the drone thing I have an issue with at the moment is probably people's not looking at the regulations around flying over whales and stuff like that is probably a big one. And I not to go down that path too much, but you've got tourism agencies promoting on Instagram all these shots of whales, and competitions being won by people photographing whales from directly above at low altitude, which is obviously a no-no. And you kind of can't help but think that there's a lot of reward in the wrong behaviour in drone stuff at the moment, and which makes it quite difficult, I'm sure, for them to regulate. As technologies get better, as you say, and people can fly them for 6 kilometres, that's all good and well until there's a couple of spotter planes in the area, and you're on the same altitude and the same, the same collision course. You've seen it happen in the States recently with the wildfire planes and stuff. It's a pretty hairy thing, and I think everyone thinks they're okay until they're not okay. It's always concerning. It's probably like unlicensed diving in a way, isn't it? You can actually
it is
a lot if you don't have your ticket, but you run into problems, and you'll soon find out why people got their ticket. Yeah.
And that's it. That saying there, everything's okay until it's not okay.
Yeah.
I was nearly late for this catch up with you because I got so engrossed this morning. I'm planning a round table on liverboard safety. There's quite a few of the industry titans and owner operators as well, and even some people that have been in liverboard incidents that are going to be sat around the table. And I was just completely engrossed in it. And that saying of it's okay until it's not okay came up so many times.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing, I think. I mean, I see it in diving, or I've seen it in diving a lot, whether it's people exceeding depth limits or diving on the wrong gas, or not having pony bottles, or not having the extra piece of gear, or not having buddies. And look, probably 99% of the time people get away with it, and, that's amazing. And then the one time they don't, unfortunately, that's kind of I guess what it ruins it for everyone. It's almost like when people take underwater photography, and there's a lot of ethical issues that go into underwater photography that I think are unspoken. No one wants to talk about them because they might actually end up limiting what you can and can't, or should and shouldn't do. And look, as an individual, the one time you do something, might not make a difference, but statistically something's going to happen. We saw I remember UP Dive Resort I went there, and they used to have the shark feeding on the pier. So you'd sit underneath like the pier, and they'd basically not chum the water, but they'd feed the sharks there, and they'd all come in, and you could watch the feeding frenzy underwater until one day some idiot, after a few drinks, jumped in off the pier during that frenzy and I think they were bitten, or there was an incident there, and obviously I don't think it was a bad one, but it just cut the whole situation. They said, no, not again. And so that's been culled now. You see people touching reefs, doing all sorts of things that they think is just that one time. But that accumulation and when you start adding all those statistics together, it does kind of ruin it for everybody. It's a pretty tough thing to cope with, I think, because underwater photography, especially, it's such a challenging market. There's so many competitions. There's so much competition to be the best. And I think it does sometimes force people to do things they're not terribly proud of. And it's a really slippery slope to fall into. I think you've got to make sure you stay on the right side of that line.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because I do wonder sometimes how difficult it is for judges for competitions, because there are people, and it doesn't take a genius to work out that a photo has been taken by manipulation. There's no way on God's green earth that photo has occurred because you happen to be in the right place at the right time. No chance.
And then it's equally, I can look at the flip side of that, because I totally agree with you on that. But if you look at the flip side, half the time, it is what are the bloody chances of seeing that make it an amazing photo? And if you put enough people in the water for enough time, these things happen. I've got a mate who it's funny, the only photo he's ever had like real credit for, he got into National Geographic and then at the Natural History Museum in London. It was under a local pier here, but he happened to get into the water on a day where an octopus got attacked by a seal. And so it's full on like Sharknado style scene of this octopus splayed out, and he was low in the water and this seal's grabbing it and pulling it away. His name's Phil Davison, and this is the sort of photo that I think it runs the risk of someone going, oh, well, why is he killing an octopus and giving it to a seal? Because that would get you the shot. Now, that would be a very unethical way of doing it. He happened to come across this day where he's just like, what the hell? And I think the saving grace for him was he was shooting on a pretty rubbish camera at the time, comparatively speaking, to what the pros were using. The clarity of it's not completely perfect. So I don't think it's got the finesse to make it look as though you'd put a lot of effort into setting something like this up. But that is a really, what the hell are the chances? And I think if he had shot that on really high-end gear that was perfectly lit and he got all those other factors completely, A grade, I reckon people would have gone after him for that and said, oh, hold on, this is what happened. I've had this with weedy sea dragons in Victoria. They do generally hang around the weeds, but there definitely are times, especially on surgy days, where they do come up out of the weeds, and they can be, we're not talking high up in the water column, but they might be, half a metre to a metre up in the water column. Now, if you've got a large wide-angle lens and you can get right down into the sand, you can get under those things, and you're not pushing them into the ocean or up into the water column, but you can get that low angle. That said, what do most people do? Because they can't be bothered getting low into the ground or low into the sand. It's a little bit of water updrift to try and get them up there. So there are definitely times where things happen that are real, but you can't. You sort of have to take the innocent until proven guilty, unfortunately, because otherwise everything seems to be, what are the chances? Well, that's what makes it special. Hey, sometimes. But there are definitely other things, as you say, that they're pretty obvious. Certain things don't live in certain places or eat certain things or do certain things. And, I had a competition I judged ages ago. It was for the Western Australia Underwater Society or something like that. And it was a natural lighting competition. So it was all meant to be completely natural light, no strobes. And one of the shots that got sent in, I noticed that the fish had brighter bellies than they did backs. And I was trying to work out where in the ocean the light source comes from below rather than above. I couldn't quite get there. So, that was a pretty obvious one. But, it can be really hard to tell.
Yeah.
I will say with that, the advice I give people who are listening to this who might be kind of going, well, where does that line sit or whatnot? I always say that the easiest way to do this is to go, if you submitted that photo to the world's greatest photo competition and you won and you were asked to provide the backstory and you were going to be completely honest about the backstory, would you be proud of the words you're saying? And if you're not, and if you feel at all awkward about the words you're saying, or that you don't think, if you feel like you have to manipulate the truth in any way to make it sound more palatable, that's probably a red flag. But if you can go into it and explain your photograph with pride and be really, truly proud of the photo you've just taken with all that went with that, I think you can be pretty happy, and I think you can tick that box. And it's the only way to keep some flexibility in that space without drawing really hard lines.
Yeah, fair one.
Yeah.
So what's the plans this year then? So obviously you're going to be jumping in locally. Are you planning anything?
Lots of local stuff. I've got one of the guys who does our guiding in Kruger. He's starting a dive operation in Mozambique, so that's maybe a potential to scoot over for a couple of days. We'll see. In the underwater photography space, to be honest, I think that local is probably going to be my hero this year. I've got a lot of other travel on where I've got 3 trips to South Africa this year. I've got a couple of weeks up, or 3 or 4 weeks up in the mountains. And we're hoping to book a family holiday over June for a few weeks, which would be, take up a lot of our time. So, if there's opportunities that poke up, I'm always jumping on board with them. But I think at the moment, I'm looking forward to getting back in locally and probably going back and looking at the photos I've taken in the past and seeing what I could do to replicate and improve on that and get myself excited about those basics again, rather than necessarily going out and finding the big stuff and, relying too much on the subject matter. I think sometimes it's focus on what's around you and making things look beautiful rather than just searching for beautiful things is a good way to go.
It's going to be an interesting experiment, to see not only the end product of what you had years ago to what you get now, but also how the landscape down there is now, whether it's changed. If it has changed, then by how much,
100%. I think there has been a lot of change, and I don't think I'm probably aware of the change as much as I should be. Hence why running underwater photography courses down here at the moment, I need to get my feet wet down here to be able to really relate back to those challenges again. I know that there's been a lot of change in terms of what's going on around the piers here. There's been a lot of construction work. We've got a lot more tourism down here locally now as well, which has had a big impact apparently. The bay's been apparently really great for visibility and things like that. And we've had pretty good days, a pretty great summer for it. So I think there's going to be some real pros and cons in it. A lot of the wrecks, there's been more deterioration, of course, over time. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think I'm just excited about my own backyard again. It's always good to look abroad and see what else is out there. But there is something really nice, especially about living in a place like Melbourne where it's not as popular to dive. It's not as well known. It's certainly no one's traveling from overseas to come and see anything other than the sea dragons, maybe. It's really nice to be able to present that to the world in a way where people go, oh, what? Where are you? And then to be explained that, just an hour down the coast in Melbourne, that's a pretty awesome feeling. I think it's a lot more rewarding sometimes than being in, a reef situation where it's known to be the world's best reef. Well, there's no reason why your photo shouldn't look amazing. It's the world's best reef. Make this place look absolutely amazing, and that's a challenge and a real accomplishment when you nail it.
Yeah. Hey, and just thinking about Melbourne, actually, I have to give a cheeky little shout out to the Flinders Pier community, or whatever their title is, but they did the campaign to prevent major construction or reconstruction or demolition of the pier itself and save the weedy habitat underneath. I can't remember his surname to save my life, but Charles, I can't remember who it was, but I had several emails back and forth with him, but bravo to those guys and girls.
Yeah, it's an important thing because it's an unknown, it's easy to say, oh, well, if you don't have the pier, there's lots of other habitat there. There's lots of grassy areas and things, but you just don't know. And when there's so few locations you can actually go to see these things, it makes you wonder, just how isolated they are. You've got Portsea Pier, you've got a population there, you've got a population at Flinders Pier, but there's really nowhere else I know of where you can reliably see them. Some out on the reef, but not in any decent numbers. It does take a very dedicated group of people to campaign for something like that, because it's honestly not something that most of the public really care about or know about. And I do think that's almost like the role of underwater photography in my world is I don't dedicate a lot of my time to those causes specifically. Like I'm not a volunteer in those organizations or anything like that. It's just for a lack of time generally. But the way I like to sort of think underwater photography contributes to that is you show people beautiful photos of something and all of a sudden they realize, oh, that's just there. It's almost the advertising campaign component of it. So hats off to all the divers who have been under Flinders Pier taking those photos and make people realize that, what they're going to miss if they let that stuff go ahead.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah, and what else you got on then? You've got the diving going on.
I've just done my drone qualifications. So
I saw that. Yeah, you got one of those nice flasher jackets with saying drone operator on the back of it.
Yeah, that tells you basically I'm busy, bugger off. Surprisingly effective. I almost feel like this is my the new trinity. It's like sea, land, and sky photography all in one. So I'm kind of enjoying the idea of maybe embarking on a bit of a project that incorporates all three of those aspects. Getting back into a bit of video stuff as well. I'd love to be able to years and years and years ago, like I'm talking 2012, I pulled together a video that was called Beneath the Surface, Victoria Beneath the Surface or something. It was like a 3-parter, and it was kind of like this whole, what are you actually missing out on? You go down the beach and you see this scape that looks like sand and seaweed, but actually here's what's under the water. Yeah. And the video footage is total trash. Like, it is really bad compared to like modern technology, you could do a much better job with just a single GoPro and a candle. It's something I'd love to recreate in a more professional way. And I think now having, the aerial stuff, I've got a lot of experience in the land stuff and the underwater stuff. It'll be really exciting to maybe see if I can recreate that as Victoria's little, promo. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, that's kind of my world, to be honest. We live a pretty busy Jesus. I probably run close to 150 to 200 workshops a year.
Jesus.
So, yeah, and then I do corporate commercial work, which is often quite boring as well. But it's good to mix it up. It keeps me balanced and sane. And so at the moment it's take things on as you can, and at the moment just focusing on getting this camera wet again, and try and reignite that spark and give myself some time back, which would be nice.
Yeah. Get that relaxation back in your life.
That's it. Now I had a question for you as well. It struck me, I had a shower thought on my way into the city this morning, actually. And have you ever considered a name change, like an official name change, to have your middle name as Under? Because that would be amazing if, I don't know if you were just like living up to the family reputation, but I'm thinking if you could get an official Matt Underwaters, would be pretty epic.
It's ironically, I've got my citizenship ceremony coming up on the 27th of Feb.
Perfect time to change.
We must be brothers from another mother or something, because literally what you've just said is what crossed my mind yesterday when the email came through. What's your full name? Can you confirm your full name? I was so tempted.
100%. I mean, unless it jeopardizes citizenship, then But that would be fantastic. I'd definitely be buying that domain.
Yeah. Well, and if you're into astrology as well, I'm born on the day that it crosses over from Aquarius to Pisces, so I either carry water or I'm a fish, one of the two.
There you go. That's you've got it all lined up here, I reckon.
Well, you kind of hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, true.
Too easy. All right, Matty, I think we'll wrap it up and let you crack on with another G&T. And
no worries.
I'll get ready for going to the Lads Curry Club.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me. And it's nice to be on a show like this, especially with seeing some of the guests you've got on here. Feel like you've gone back to the small fish for this one, but it'll be hopefully I'll come back roaring this year and throw my name into the hat again.
Mate, there's no small fish in this pond. Everyone's equal. It's everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone's got an experience to share, and it's just the right way to do it. There's no hierarchy in this pond, I tell you.
Love it.
Are you going to be coming up to the dive show in March at all?
I have no idea of a dive show in March, to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
Well,
What's going on?
We've got ADEX, which is the Asian Dive Expo, so you usually get the ones in Singapore and all that as well.
Yep.
But ADEX has actually now acquired Oztech as well. So what was the technical conference? The two are going to be under the same roof. So it's like mid-March, I think, like 16th, 17th, something like that. And then there's the Go Diving show in September as well. That's up in Sydney too.
Fantastic. Well, no, I'll definitely have a look. I was at Oztech in Melbourne a couple of years ago. It was after COVID, presenting on one of the side stages there. But I didn't realise it was back in full swing in that. So no, I'll definitely check it out. Would love to pop up and get part of that industry again. It's been a while.
Mate, that was that Melbourne one that you've just Oztech Melbourne 2 years ago. That was the one that I just missed you. I was interviewing someone else because I was down there as well.
Right.
And I was running around doing little mini interviews and I just missed you. Yeah.
You probably caught me at a better time now. I think a couple of years ago, if you asked me what I'd been doing with my underwater photography lately, I was drawing on some relatively distant experiences at that point. So, there's been a bit more water under the bridge now. So, in a much better place for it.
Beauty. Well, I look forward to seeing how it all goes and the photos that come out the other end as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll be in touch and, I'll hopefully catch you at Oztech.
Sweet as. All right, brother. Thank you very much for your time. And for you guys listening out there, thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.
See ya.